We got Shannon McNevan from Starseed on the podcast today. Shannon, it's a pleasure to have you on, my friend.
It's great to be on, Jim. Thanks for thinking of me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to get started by talking a little bit about your genesis in the business, your beginning in the business, because some people might see you as an outsider who's come in and launched this massive management company, and you've done so well. You've had incredible success with your artists, but you've been around the business in various capacities for a while.
Yeah, for a minute, it still seems fresh because we had the exact same impression you just described when we got into Boots and Hearts. We definitely weren't coming from directly from the music business, and I was coming out of the sports world, which is all I'd ever known. So I we got into that. Boots and Hearts was about the idea. It came out, obviously pitched it about a year before we did anything, and did a year of research, and then actually launched it. So it's been just over a decade of technically being in the music industry, but it was in the live industry for 5.5, 6 years, and then now in the label and management side for 4 years. So yeah, it's been a blast. It still doesn't feel like it's been a decade, but it's been great.
Do you feel like coming in from the outside, coming from the sports world, and transferring some of the knowledge that you acquired in that world gave you a fresh set of eyes as it pertained to putting together the vision for Boots and Hearts? I mean, sometimes one of the problems we have in this business is we get too myopic. We're too close to it. And so it's not a bad idea to have somebody come in with a fresh perspective and, remind us what we might be doing wrong or right.
Yeah, I'm sure that had something to do with it. I think probably a good mix of a healthy dose of not knowing what I didn't know, not knowing the reasons that certain things weren't happening. Or the more you learn about anything, the more you realize the reason the experts told you it couldn't happen wasn't because they didn't want it to happen, is because it wasn't smart, or there was lots of good reasons you shouldn't do it that way. And when you come in and you're just full of piss and vinegar, and you have a vision, and in your mind everything seems more simple than it is. And the adage of ignorance is bliss. Certainly, I fully understand the value of that, because if we understood what we did at the year 4 and 5 of Boots, I'm not sure any of us would have either had the excitement or the gumption to do it. And also on Stan's end, I'm sure if he looks back, he probably had lots of things that he learned over those first 2 or 3 years that he might not have either. So I'm really thankful we did it, and I'm thankful for the ignorance we walked in with, because I always like to say we basically failed up. I think we made every mistake we could make those first 2 years, but had some good leaders and mentors that had said, if you're willing to work 3 or 4 times as hard as the people who know you can do anything, and as long as you bring the humility with you to be able to say, hey, that was on us. We screwed up. We thought it would work for this reason, or we learned this, or we'd like to try this. It was just a lot of curiosity, and thankfully a lot of people looking out for us, and finding a lot of favor throughout the way.
And you're referring to Stan Dunford, who's your uncle, who's the proprietor of Boots and Hearts. So you worked with him, but backing up a little bit initially, what are some of the success stories that you had from a fan experiential perspective that you believe came from the outside in, where it was like this had never been traditionally done at a festival? And as you mentioned, ignorance is bliss. Sometimes you just come in with this concept, you go, this would be a great experience, and you were actually able to execute on that initiative. So give me an example of something.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just take it from a macro level down. The entire thing initially wasn't supposed to be a country festival. It was supposed to be, we went to Bonnaroo. I went to Bonnaroo with a group of good buddies. I thought I was a big music fan. I'd been to all the things in Canada that I'd heard of or that I could go to. And the Havelock Jamboree was our local big country festival. And I'd been to all the Toronto shows that were country and not country. And I thought I was a big music fan. And then I went to Bonnaroo with this group of friends, and they'd been going 5 years in a row. And the first day I couldn't fully get it. I didn't understand why you'd pay $1,000, between travel and the tickets and everything else, and drive 15 hours to go and see a bunch of bands in a field that you could see in Toronto, or that you could see, within an hour of where we all lived every year, it seemed. And then I experienced it. And somewhere in the middle of that experience, I realized it was a very spiritual experience, the same thing that I personally find at church, that connection to God that I find there, or the connection to God that people find in all kinds of different ways in life. It wasn't until I started to ask these guys the questions of why do you do this, that they started to describe this visceral experience and this spiritual experience and this connectivity they were feeling. And as a sociology background and major in school, I've always been obsessed and curious with why does anybody do anything, trying to find the habits and the patterns. And after talking to 48 hours worth of fans, 80,000 of them from around the world, I realized they were all saying the same thing. They were all having this same spiritual experience that was so much bigger than any individual band or any music specifically or any song. And that point of agreement, whatever you believe in, the point of agreement is the point of power. And their point of agreement was they were there for music. And with 70 some bands over the course of 4 days, hundreds at Bonnaroo, nobody was there for one band. Everybody was there some to see their favorite bands, some to explore. Everybody was trying to convince their friends to go to the show they wanted to. And it was a really unique observation. And I came home pretty obsessed with it. And I was working on my MBA at the time, and I'd still fully planned on trying to get into an NHL front office. And I'd interviewed with a bunch of NHL teams, and I just finished selling my professional teams I'd owned in Germany. And I started doing all my MBA case studies on music festivals. I became pretty obsessed with it. And like it, you read enough John Grisham novels and you start to feel like you could be a lawyer, right? That's the ignorance is bliss thing. In your head, the limited knowledge you have, you start to be like, oh, I think I get this. And you'll laugh because you're a promoter and you understand the nuances, but I really thought I got it. I really honestly believed, I would have told you that first year, that I actually believed I knew what I was doing. I knew I didn't know what I was going to know, but I actually believed I knew enough to feel confident about what we were doing. And thank God.
You guys did a lot of things right out of the gate. I mean, you curated great lineups with a great diverse lineup within the format, obviously, of up and comers, and obviously some legends speckled in. I think the first year was Tim McGraw as a headliner, Alabama and Kid Rock, if I remember correctly. And then you curated the rest of the lineup really well. But one thing that I really appreciated, putting on my artist representative hat as an agent, is how you handled the VIP experience, right? Like you didn't have that sea of white chairs in front of the stage right away. You guys were very cognizant of making sure that you made the fan experience great, but also making sure that you understood that the artist gets a great experience out of it.
Yeah, and that came from literally, we spent almost a full year researching the top festivals around the world and what we believed made them special. And I remember Ashley Capps, who ran Bonnaroo, seeing him at the Billboard conference say, and in private say, 80% of these festivals are the same. You don't get obsessed with trying to do everything original. Focus on that 20% that makes your festival unique. It's always going to be just like a college party. Is the drinks cold? Is the washroom clean? Is the lineup for the washroom short? And is the music good? The same thing that makes a college party good makes a festival good. The question is, what's that 20% that makes your festival unique? So, man, we did a ton of research and went all over the place, and we weren't thinking, our minds weren't in the box of country. Our minds were just thinking, what are the best experiences globally we've seen, and how do we put that on? And so, yeah, like I said, a lot of those things we were thinking experientially, and in hindsight, some of them we probably would have even changed had we understood the costs and the full situations we got into. But thankfully, one of the things that's always been consistent with Stan and anything he's ever done is world class and excellence is always top priority. And thankfully, he
at any cost.
Yeah, literally, and across the board at everything we did, he was always pushing that, and I'm so thankful for that. I learned so much from him throughout that process. But that was the part that never got compromised throughout. Of all the things we didn't know, the questions always started from, what does the experience need to be? What is the fan experience going to be? What's the artist experience going to be? And of all the things we didn't know, thankfully, that part was never compromised. So to your point, I remember part of the fun of it was trying to think of the surprise and delight, right? Everybody expects to come and see, I'll use that example, Brett Kissel that Thursday night. I'll never forget that. Everybody expects to come and hear him play his hits and his songs. And I always thought my job was to figure out, okay, well, but what can we do that they haven't expected or they won't expect? What's going to be the surprise and the delight? And not every artist camp's open to it. A lot of artist camps are like, listen, kid, this is show 11 of 40 this summer. And I remember that specifically. You guys were like, what do you want to do on top of that transport truck?
Yes,
done. And we didn't know exactly how it would work. Coors was obviously pumped. They were they had the big truck set up, but that became one of the big marketing shots and one of the moments we used for a long time. So that was always the fun part to me, is just trying to connect with the camps and say, everybody's seen you in this area before. What does it look like, and what can we do that they're not going to forget, and it'll give them that butterfly feeling.
Right. And just for people listening in, to give them some context, there was this gigantic Coors Light semi-truck parked near the stage. Brett Kissel actually climbed up on that truck and did a couple songs. on top of it, like using it as a
Yeah.
stage. And people just went crazy over that. It provided some great opportunity for us to garner some great social media footage, which
Yeah.
we used to promote the event. And it was a very exciting, unique experience. Quite simplistic when you think about the actual logistics of pulling it off. But you're right. You've got to have someone with a vision on the buyer side, which we had in you, and someone in the artist side who's receptive to going, yeah, you know what? It's better for us if this is a unique experience. This is what we want too,
Yeah.
and luckily we had both of those scenarios at play. Um, so you talked a little bit about exploiting uniqueness in a positive way in terms of taking the 80-20 rule and applying it to festivals. And 80% of it's going to be similar to every other festival, but 20% is going to be truly different, unique. You've also transferred a lot of that, I would say, into artist management. And as you evolved out of Boots and Hearts, you started this artist management company, and you've done a great job at exemplifying the uniqueness of each client you have. When you are looking for clients to work with, is the uniqueness, I mean, that's got to be one of your top priority factors when you're considering taking on someone new.
Yeah, I think so. It again, everybody has their own. Your reality is based on your perception and on your history, right? And so my reality is based on the way I see the world, and I've always seen it through sociology. So what makes people do what they do, and it's brands. I don't believe people know what they want until they've experienced it. And if you can give someone something they didn't know they wanted, and once they experience it, they can't believe they ever lived without it. You're never going to have to spend another marketing dollar on anyone that person knows. And that's always the way I've always looked at everything. That's how I was taught to build brands. So I look at the artist the same way. You're obviously looking for a human you believe in. At the end of the day, you don't, you can work as hard as you want and have the best ideas and marketing concepts in the world, even the best music in the world. If you don't find an artist and a human that is going to work hard enough and that has that likability to pull off a brand, it doesn't really matter what the brand is, right? So thankfully, we've had a chance to work with some amazing humans and some amazing artists. But yeah, on a brand level, on the management side, I believe if you can't tell the story in a way that everybody wants to know more, and if people aren't immediately curious and intrigued to want to know more by the brand narrative, then I think you're battling uphill on anything. And so we've tried to do that right from the beginning, and thankfully we've been able to find some artists that their visions and their passions are really unique. You're obviously looking, you don't want to stack up six solo male artists, and then you're trying to convince the different people in the industry, oh, this is such an amazing record, and they're hearing, okay, yeah, is this one bigger than the other one, or who's your top priority, and what are you pushing? And we were trying to just really separate things into the different lanes: one solo male, one solo female. We initially started that way, duo, group, trying to just keep it really simple. But on the brand level, trying to figure out what's that 20% that people will resonate with and somehow go, man, this guy gets me, or man, this guy, I feel like this person's in my inner circle. They somehow are articulating and writing out my life story. And um, you're not always going to nail that. You're not always going to get lucky on that. But I believe if you start from that perspective and that's the end goal, um, it forces you to get to know your artist on a level that you can understand and explain their brand. And by putting tight brand parameters around something, more than anything, it just allows you to say no. I think it's
Right.
more valuable to know how to quickly say no if something doesn't fit a brand than to explore all the things that might work. And I think the less you know about a brand, or the less defined a brand is, the harder it is to say no.
Right. And in the early days, and you still are, you've got this great relationship with Universal Music. Um, how much did their expertise play into it as you were getting this thing rolling and kind of finding your footing as a manager?
Huge. I mean, I not unlike the festival world, my ignorance couldn't have been higher. I had 5 years at the festival side of experience with managers. Um, your exposure to managers as a buyer, you get to experience some conflict, you get to experience some understanding and push back and forth of the value of artists, you get some level of understanding of their worth and what makes them work. And as the buyer side, depending on how much you want to study your fans and how much data analysis you want to do, you start to get an understanding of what makes the buyers and the ticket buyers in that area tick and why they love them. And but at the end of the day, really you need to actually learn boots on the ground, day to day. What is the process of this? And if you're managing something from the top down, really you're trying to figure out, how do I build a team that gives us the best chance to succeed? The label's such a huge part of that, and understanding how a label works. in order to not just keep them accountable and get the best out of them, but also to just collaborate, to try to figure out how to get them excited and what makes them tick. At the end of the day, we're dealing with humans in any of these areas, and you can get defensive in any of these regards as a manager, because at the end of the day, you're trying to keep everyone accountable. But I think if you can remain curious about what makes them tick, and whoever that is, maybe they don't love country music, especially at a major. Everybody has to focus on everything. It's not like majors in Nashville where this is the one genre they live and breathe. The majors in Canada generally have a macro skill set in marketing or a macro skill set in promo, but they have to work lots of genres. And so if you approach it as if, I don't know, I guess I just try to, our hope and our goal was to approach it to try to figure out what they loved and what they were passionate and excited about. And thankfully got a chance to work with and learn from a bunch of people who are really passionate about developing artists. Not all of them knew country super well. They were curious and excited, and thankfully really believed in the James Barker Band right out of the gate. But again, it was a lot of fun to work through it with them, because we had to remain curious from both sides. They didn't know necessarily a lot about country because they didn't have a lot of folks in-house that had worked country. But they had a real appreciation for its growth. And what they were really, really passionate about as a label was artist development, which was exciting to plug into. And when that's what they're excited about, it makes it easy to align and collaborate, because they're comfortable problem solving when they're comfortable developing artists. There's no straight path for that.
Right, and they're incentivized by the incremental success along the way, right? So if you find someone who's passionate about artist development, as you start to make these steps, you get these gold singles, these number one singles early in the game with James Barker Band, especially. It's like, okay, what else is Shannon cooking up? Because we're interested, right? And you found a great way to really spark the passion in people around you, as well as continue to have it for artists themselves. Now, as it pertains to developing a brand with an artist, have you ever had a situation where the artist sort of thinks they're one thing and you're looking at it observationally and critically, and you're going, if we tweak this 10 or 15%, I think we could take you in a slightly different direction, and there could be much more success in that domain for you if you'd be willing to go down that road? And then how do you navigate that conflict if you do come up against it?
Yeah, we probably more, maybe to a fault, we're pretty exhaustive in signing an artist. We do a full whiteboard session with the artist, a full whiteboard session with their family. We want to get as much information as we can about what allows this artist to be at their best, and then what are the patterns or the tendencies that are toxic in this artist's life, or what holds them back from being at their best. And generally throughout that vetting process, you don't usually get to the family whiteboard unless you're pretty sure you want to work with this artist. But even in the initial stages, to me, it's all about the vision. Not unlike dating, that doesn't mean you're not going to get duped. An artist might say what they think you want to hear. An artist might say what they think you're looking for. You're not always going to make the right decision there, but your hope, at least in my opinion, is to try to get what is real. What is this artist really, what really makes them tick? Because at the end of the day, we can both get excited about a marketing idea that's going to work. And this guy looks and feels like Hardy and Morgan Wallen, and that's working. So let's do it, because nobody in Canada is doing that. And all of a sudden, you realize a year in, after you put all the work in, that this guy never really cared about that. He just knew that would work. To me, that would be one of the bigger shames you could get into, is really taking the time to build somebody and put the effort in and talk to everybody and lay the foundation and find out that their vision isn't the same. So we definitely spend a ton of time on that. And with some prominent artists, we've had some disagreements and ended up not working with them. Some of them people were most excited. I'd say a couple of people I've looked up to for a long time that I was so excited the thought even sitting down with, artists that I grew up really, really excited about, sitting down and getting a chance to potentially manage them, and ended up realizing what I was excited about or what I thought would be their next season. It wasn't what they were excited about. And so I don't think that's it's more uncommon than I realized. I guess I believed as a fan, you generally have an idea or share a vision. But in some of those cases, I was so glad to realize that before we started working together. To your point with the conflict, yeah, we've had some really good conflict. I think if you're being honest in a relationship with an artist in our business, if you don't have conflict, somebody's not being honest with how competitive we are and how competitive we believe our artists are, and we like our artists to be. Kind of like the Raptors game last night. You see, 0.7 seconds left, and Kyle Lowry screaming at his coach, "Why did you take the time out?" there's a 99.9% chance they've already won that game, and that's how competitive and passionate they both are. So he shouldn't have taken that time out. I think that kind of conflict should be normal if you both want to win badly enough and you're both being honest. You should have the kind of disagreements that say that's good, but I believe you can be better. That's good,
Right.
but that's safe. Or I'm worried if you do this, here's what we're walking into. And we've had a lot of that creatively, and in my opinion, that positive conflict and being able to work through that verbally and trying at least to develop the emotional intelligence to stay curious in it, where you can be passionate about it without taking it personally.
Right.
That's something I'm not perfect at. It's something I've had to work a lot on because I'm a really passionate guy. But thankfully, with my leadership coach, that's been what we focused on most is conflict management, because the very best stuff we've ever seen our artists do, and the very best creativity that's come out of them, and entertainment that's come out of them, and all those, I would say each of them we can trace back generally to one or two moments that we had more conflict than usual in regards to what was right, what was best. And I love that. I hope if I ever lose the ability to disagree passionately without taking it personally, I'm probably the wrong guy to be managing them.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that if you've got too much domination on one side or the other, there's just a tendency for the relationship to become pathologized, and it just doesn't work. And to your point, I'm glad you brought up the Raptors. Really, a good manager in lots of ways is like a great coach. And if you remember your athletic background, a great coach isn't telling you what you want to hear. A great coach isn't always exemplifying your best traits. They're also reminding you of the things that you need to work on, and that 5% or 3% where you need to get better. And so I think you just sum that up perfectly. It's such a good reminder for people that, this business isn't just about saying yes. It's about challenging people to bring out the best of the best within them, and doing that from a place of intent where they can feel it. And then they know you're not just trying to put your stamp on something. They know that your heart, your soul, your emotion, your passion is all aligned with going, hey, listen, there's a reason I'm pushing you this direction. And there's a reason there's a little friction here. It's because I love you and I want the best for you. And I believe that this is it. And here's why. And your ability to communicate that can't be understated in this business, because you're right. It's so easy to just defer, take the easy way out, not ruffle any feathers. But at the end of the day, I don't believe it pans out for anybody.
No, and I remember, I can't count, probably every coach I've ever had has said this, but they'll say something like, hey, if I ever stop, don't take this personally. If I ever stop yelling at you like this or getting on you like this, then you should be worried.
Right.
You should be worried
because I don't care anymore.
If I stop coming after you to be better and I stop pushing you to be better, you should be worried. And the best feeling I've had so far in this industry on the management end is when an artist pushes me back. When they realize that I'm having a week where for whatever reason I'm not at my best, and they notice it and they push me back on, hey, I need you to, and you're like, man, thank God we're here. Because if you can do that with me, that means you're comfortable with me doing it with you. And that means you believe that at the end of the day, I've got more to offer. And I think when you can push each other that way, that's a great relationship to be in, and it feels great. It's not unlike a workout partner. You don't feel like getting up every morning at 6 a.m., but if you have a workout partner, you're gonna be there, and you're not gonna let them down, and you're competitive about it. So I think the root of a lot of what we've done has just been pure competitiveness. I think it took me a long time as a people pleaser to accept that not everyone was going to like me, and that if I pushed as hard as I wanted to and was as competitive as I am, to not just achieve something normal, but trying to achieve something extraordinary, and constantly have some level of extraordinary in front of us where it actually seems impossible, where you have your possible lane and the things you can control, and trying to keep this miraculous lane that we're not 100% sure how to do this, but we believe we can do it. So how do we just keep focusing on it? And if I don't have something in that lane all the time, I know I have a hard time staying motivated and keeping excited to try to push for that extraordinary. And trying to be that open and honest with people, it's taken me a minute, especially as we move into the label end and the management end, and you have so many different personalities you're managing, but also just so many different service providers you're managing. And at the end of the day, depending on the season we're at in life, sometimes you have a lot more piss and vinegar and a lot more gumption and a lot more just stick-to-itiveness to get things done. And then you have seasons where, whether it's having kids or whether you've overcommitted or just taken on too much, where you actually have to be honest with yourself about, we have too many artists, or we don't, I don't have as much bandwidth as I needed to keep pushing through this. And uh,
Right.
that's been an interesting balancing act, and just thing to learn, as somebody with young kids, and who'd spent, Claire and I got married late at 36 and had kids right away. And as a result of that, I'd had 16 years of building my own habits of working. Everybody wondered how I was getting so much done. And what I never told them is, after dinner, and I'd go back and work again until I fell asleep. And putting the extra hours in allowed me to accomplish more. It wasn't necessarily a healthy routine or a sustainable routine when I entered into the family season. So, trying to remember that, to just establish that point of agreement with everybody, from your label service providers there to your agents to your lawyers, everybody, trying to establish a clear point of agreement, so that as things do fluctuate, and for whatever reason, one week or another, you're not at your best or they're not at theirs, that you can hold each other to that point of agreement. I've just realized, more and more, specifically with our artists, that's the most important piece we can have clear. You can tell an artist something they don't want to hear at all, as long as you have a clear point of agreement that, guys, we agreed that in this season, to be at your best, these were the things that you'd need. By being able to find those points of agreements with them, with their family, with their wives or their significant others, in a way where you're not coming down on them. You're even as you hold them accountable, you're reminding them how much you believe in them. Those points of agreement make it so much easier to do that. To say
Yeah,
something.
it's a little bit like a parallel relationship to a degree. We talked about the coaching aspect, but there's a parallel in parenting, right? Where
Yeah.
you're a dad, obviously. You've got two young boys. You're probably dealing with the balance of that and building out this successful company and all the obligations you have there. But at the end of the day, you're encouraging the best in those boys, and that is not dissimilar to the relationship you have with your artists, where you're encouraging the best in them.
Yeah, and like I said, the fun part is when your artists, once they see the consistency and they realize there's safety there, that
Right.
you've got their back so hard and you couldn't believe in them anymore, and that there's very little they could do outside of, a very few things that they could really do, where you'd love them any less. And I'd say probably even to the point where there's nothing that they could do that you'd love them less. You'd correct them or keep them accountable. Once they believe that belief is there and that kind of love is behind them, I really think it changes somebody. I know for me personally, I can remember the 4 to 5 coaches I've had, or the people in my life who believed in me beyond where I believed in myself. And it's amazing how much that changes you as a human and unlocks you when somebody looks at you and just goes, "You got this. You have everything you need. You work hard enough and you got this. I know you can do this." Sometimes that's all you need to hear, right? Is just that
It might
something.
be the it might be the biggest and best antidote to insecurities out there. When you have that moment where you don't believe in yourself, and we've all been there, and
Mhm.
someone who you respect steps up and says, "You're capable. You've got this. You just got to tweak your tactics and strategies a little bit." Now, you've got a great partner in the company, obviously, in Don Green. How critical has he been in that role for you, and how do you guys complement each other in Starseed?
Don's been amazing. We have a third partner named Adam Scoos.
Right.
And Scoos is a Wall Street guy, and I went to school and played hockey with him at Bowdoin, and he actually helped us put the financial plans and a lot of the a lot of the venture capital stuff together for Boots, and then came over and ran our back end. And so he does all of our digital end and intelligence. And Don, anybody who knows Don knows the same things about Don. He's so consistent, and his integrity. And I've been on the other side of it. I could only imagine. I didn't, thankfully, have to be on the other side of it as a manager when Don was at the CCMAs, because Don's integrity is so consistent that it's really annoying, especially if you're in conflict with him, because he doesn't get emotionally engaged. So when you're talking through things with Don, he's looking at facts and he's looking at spreadsheets and he's looking at the rules and he's saying, this is what it says. Here's what we have to do. And it's been such a great balance for me, because I believe we need the balance, but I love living on the other side. I love living in the what's possible, the curiosity, the what ifs. And Don has 2 feet all the time in the reality and in the if X then Y situations. And so it allows me to dream on a level where I can stay curious and stay focused on the business plans and the visions. And he's such a great filter. And I know there's no emotion there. So he's such a great filter when he just goes, "I don't think we can do that." or he'll say something like, "That's crazy, but I think you can do that." And so it's fun. It's kind of like, I feel like back and forth, not just one way, kind of like a caddy in golf, where those are the best golfers in the whole world, and they still let their caddy overrule them 2 or 3 times around. That no, don't hit that shot. Um, Seems counterintuitive. Why would Tiger Woods take advice from somebody when he's the best golfer in the world? But there's a reason you need that. Is that just that checking your emotions and checking your ego? And Don and I have been a really good balancing back and forth. And Scoose, you don't know Adam as well, but man, he's an absolute rock, and he's the smartest guy I've ever met. And having somebody smarter than you in every room you're in gives you a lot of cover, and it just challenges you constantly. So it's been a lot of fun working with those guys. And again, back to your adage about boots, we were totally ignorant coming into this, so we built everything backwards from what's best for the artist. And in some ways, that was really smart. Most ways, and in a few ways, we're like, "Frig, did we ever structure that deal way in their favor?" But at the end of the day, we only knew what we knew. So it's been fun learning the process with these guys and growing with them. And it's a really unique skill set they bring. And then we have 4 or 5 other guys as well. Mike Kozel's been a huge rock in everything we've done, and he was one of those jackknifes we had at Boots and Hearts where we couldn't find something too big for him. Everything we gave him, he always over-delivered on it. And he was an intern coming out of university at the time, and literally every job we'd give him, he'd finish it in half the time, and it'd be twice as good as we thought. And to the point where you started to kind of joke with each other, being like, "What can we give him that he can't do?" And eventually you realized he was pretty comfortable walking in shoes too big for him and just figuring it out. So he's been great to work with. And then we brought a few more guys on. We actually followed your lead, watching what you guys did with Darty, and the way you guys really elevated the game in regards to social media, and the way people could experience and see and really feel what you guys were doing when they weren't there. And met a great kid named Austin Schaaf last year, and saw some work he'd done. And just same as everything, you're looking around at who's doing what best and just trying to figure out how to keep getting better. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, you guys have done a great job at taking a look at the landscape, looking at things that were maybe working, not working, and then sort of reverse engineering your plan moving forward from there. Now, initially, when you decided to launch this management company and you took a look at the landscape, what was it about the landscape that made you go, "I'll bet if we took this approach, we could do something better or offer an alternative to what else is out there"? Like, was it sort of a gaping hole in one particular area, or was it just a desire from you to always want to work with artists directly in a management capacity? Like, I would imagine it was a blend of both, where you're passionate about it, but you also see some opportunity.
Yeah, I wish I could say something really profound here, and that I had this epiphany and I just knew in the blueprint. But to be frank, it was reverse engineered through. I got this opportunity at Universal. Jeffrey had just taken over as the CEO there, and I didn't know Jeffrey that well, but I'd always been really impressed with the way he approached business and the entrepreneurial spirit that he had, and always questioning why not, how can we do it better, and he seemed to just have a history of accomplishing extraordinary, or in some cases impossible, things out of Canada. So when he took that over, and he said, "Would you like to come on and try it?" It was first just a 6-month opportunity. It was part-time. I didn't know anything about labels and how they even made money, to be honest. And he said, "Don't worry, we have a whole label full of people, a building full of people who know how to do that. We're looking for somebody who really understands the space, and I think you'd be great at this." And so thank God for his foresight. He saw it a long time before I did. And one of the things he'd always said, because he came from arts and crafts, and a lot of the big artists they had that they did extraordinary things with, they managed and were the label for. And so I'd asked him a lot of questions about that. And as we traveled to different festivals or just in the car on different things, got to pick his brain. And it was really valuable hearing his insight and why he said he believed a lot of things worked. And the more research I did, it's funny, I wasn't really at the time thinking, "Man, I'd be great at this," or "Man, we should build this." I was looking, to me, it seemed like the most important thing you could be is the priority for a manager. Either the top priority in a lane, or obviously everybody would like to be the top priority overall. But if somebody builds a great business, I don't believe it's imperative as they build a team that you're their very top priority overall, as much as that they have the time to prioritize your business plan. Whatever the business plan you've agreed on is, if they have the team and the time to prioritize that and accomplish that, then I don't believe it's unreasonable to think you could get the same service from someone who manages 30 artists as one. But from what I could see, all of the top managers in the country they didn't just have lean rosters. They had strong rosters and deep rosters in some cases. And as at the time, it was just JBB. And I remember saying to James directly, James is a really, really matter of fact, raised with an auctioneer father, worked in the business with his dad, and is much smarter and wiser than he probably gives himself credit for on the business front right from the day I met him. And I remember James saying, hey, we've talked to different people, and I'm not quite sure what to do here. And he was managing himself. He was booking everything. They just started with Feldman, but prior he'd booked 100+ shows that year before, and they were just. I just said to him, dude, I think right now the top managers, I don't think you're going to be able to be the priority for any of them. So why don't I work with you and I'll just cover you until we can get you to the US, or until one of them has an opportunity where they can prioritize you. So literally it was reverse engineered from there. Like I said, I wish I could take more credit for it. I had this big idea, but really it was, I believed in James and those guys so much and didn't feel like anybody was in a position to prioritize them. There was a lot of groups at the time that had just been signed, and almost every manager had a group. So it literally started from there, saying, listen, I'm going to be working with you every day anyways on this A&R stuff. Why don't we just try it? And over the course of that first 6 months, and like anything you get in the middle of, you got to learn it, right? You're over your head, and as long as you're honest about what you don't know, you can learn pretty quick if you ask lots of questions. And somewhere in that 6 to 12 month period where everybody gives you leeway and lets you ask dumb questions, we also took on the rec laws, and I'd known Jen and Stu forever. Both those people came through the Boots and Hearts Emerging Artist Showcase, so I'd known them for a long time. And both of them were the same thing. Let's do this until we figure out the right place for you.
Yeah,
And
just beautiful, rock solid human beings too. Like
yeah,
what a joy it must be to work with them.
yeah, it's amazing across the board. Like I said, it's been that's a big part of it, is getting to know the families and getting to know where they came from and kind of what these kids are made of. Because as you know, you could get every single break possible and have perfect songs and literally catch every break for 3 years, and then between year 0 and the end of year 3, that guy's still going to question, is this even working? He's still going to question, where's the money coming from? He's still going to question, I just had a #1 single and I still don't know if I can tour, hard ticket tour. A lot of these things, there's going to be not just doubt, but there's going to be things that make these people wonder and feel like it's not working. And so knowing there's some resilience there helps. And thankfully these kids all had it in spades. So it's been a lot of fun to learn with them. But to be frank, like I said, I wish I could give you a more profound answer. It started from, I don't think there's an opportunity for you to plug in with any of the managers I do see where you'd be a priority. And we had really aggressive business plans. Our goals were, we believed we were going to be able to get gold records from song 1. And we believed we were going to be able to do it every 20 weeks. And so the business plans we laid out were so aggressive that it made sense to just try it, because everybody we talked to, and not in a condescending way, on a data level, they'd say, well, it's never happened. This has never happened like this. So are you sure you don't need to get this aggressive. You don't need to tell people this is going to happen, because you're kind of setting yourself up to fail. And I remember standing at our first CRS. I'll never forget. You guys had done this lots. You all knew how CRS worked. It was my first one. And I remember standing there. I'd met the Ontario PDs and a lot of the Ontario folks because we were at Boots, but I didn't know the majority of those folks. I knew of them. I'd seen them at the CCMAs. I had a lot of respect for, you hear the stories, but I didn't know them personally. And that was before Don was on. And I remember looking out and just saying, I'm not 100% sure how we're going to do this, but I really sincerely believe that these guys aren't just going to be what's next in Canada, but these guys have what it takes in the next 2 years to be at the table competing with the best in the world. And we're not 100% sure how to do it. And we've never done it. At the time I was speaking as the A&R guy. So I said, we've never done it before as a label. And I'm helping these guys in the management, man. We've never done it before as management. But I really believe there's a path forward if we all believe in this. And if you guys show up for us and give us some honest, critical feedback where we can really break some rules here, but also break some boundaries for what's next. And thank God a lot of people stepped up. A lot of people, there's probably 50 to 100 people who would tell you they're the reason the James Barker Band worked or the Rec Laws worked, and every one of them's right. We got so many breaks and so much favor, but more importantly, we got so much critical feedback on the things we were trying. And it was back to that failing up thing. We were aggressive and we had some really bold plans, but more than anything, we were curious. And thankfully, a lot of key stakeholders and gatekeepers that didn't have to called us back to say, I like this. Have you thought about this? Or this is cool, but this is going to happen. Are you prepared for this? And just a lot of learning that if they weren't that direct in their feedback, we would have had to learn it the hard way. So really thankful for how many people rallied around it. But it was definitely a story of reverse engineering more so than a story of here was our amazing plan for starting a management company.
Innovation, the mother of necessity. Or
You know,
necessity is the mother of innovation, I should say.
yeah,
And so with James Barker Band, being the first artist into the foray of management, I think another huge advantage they had is their songwriting prowess. It's off the chart.
yeah.
You found a great creative nucleus with them. They probably had built some of that out themselves in the early days because I know James is very hands on. But it was like there must have been a part of you that was just so excited about what you had in the can, even while you were releasing songs in the early days.
Yeah, and again, I'll call this out before I even start talking about this, in case anybody listening thinks I knew a lot about publishing prior to this. Um, I have a brother. I have a brother, Trevor, who spent 20 years in the rock world, and has always written 100% of his music. So I grew up being the little brother that had no choice. He'd be like, "Hey, check out this new song. Check out this new song." So I'd heard all kinds of work tapes and writing, but I didn't even know people co-wrote. Like my exposure to publishing was my brother. My exposure
Right.
to the creative process was he goes in a room by himself and comes out with an album.
Yeah, he's
Um,
able to do it in a vacuum. Not many people are.
yeah, and taught himself how to produce and do all these pieces, um, and then 500 million streams and million records sold later. They did really well. So I've always got to watch that in front of me. What I didn't know was how structured Nashville was in regards to co-writes, in regards to songwriting, and the prestige of the songwriting. And I learned it as I was studying it. But to your point about what does it look like? Well, I knew again from, well, I'll tell you one quick story that showed me everything I needed to know about the James Barker Band. The way the Emerging Artist Showcase is set up is everybody plays two songs one day, 8 artists go against each other. The crowd response and the judges decide on who the top two are that play on the main stage on Sunday. Well, they only get one song on the main stage. So they have to decide. There was no rule there. They didn't have to perform an original. They didn't have to perform a cover. It was whatever they thought would give them the best chance. Well, most people go up there and do a cover because the
Yeah.
crowd's going to be into it. There's, however many people, 40,000 people here that don't know you and they don't know your music. But if you dig into a good cover, you might get them. And the Barker boys went up and played a song called Livin' the Dream that they'd written in the fields the year before at Boots. And nobody had ever heard it. And it's not a radio song. It's not a hit. It's just a fun loving song that was like, here's who we are. Take it or leave it. And I remember hearing that and going, man, the size of the set on these guys to go up there and do that. And they obviously won. And then connecting with James, and this is before I knew that core nucleus of guys that's been so core to what we've done creatively. When I first sat with James, he was like, what do you think of these? And they'd already written 4 or 5 songs that I believed were as strong as anything I'd heard on the radio. And it became really clear. And hearing his backstory, James had been doing this for a long time. By that point, he'd almost had his 10,000 hours in already in writing and playing. And this isn't a kid who grew up playing sports and just played music to get girls. This is a kid who literally spent the hours that I spent on sports on music every day.
It's
And
a science to him.
so his musical chops and his songwriting chops were already really, really strong at the time. He'd already written a ton with Michael Hardy, who's now one of probably the biggest writer this last year in Nashville, and at the time was just brand new in Nashville. And he'd got set up through some folks, and he was just, James was going to do it. He was one of those kids that it was going to work for him, regardless of who he worked with, regardless of who came around him. And he introduced me to who you're referring to, Todd Clark and Gavin Slade and Travis Wood. And I literally can't. Nothing I would say could fully articulate the difference those guys have made in our life and our careers. And when you find somebody who understands what you're doing and trusts you on the level they do, and vice versa, man, it's so valuable. And I'm so thankful for those guys. They took the time. Not many writers would take the time to sit and listen to me explain the brand and why I believe the brand was important. And in Nashville specifically, most of these writers, sometimes they'll even do 2-a-days. They want to do a 5-hour song. And when you come back and say, I think there's a lot here, maybe in day 2, 3, or 4 on this song, this will be a smash. Most writers don't want to hear that. They're not open to that. In the rock world, that's not how it works. In the rock world, you're constantly editing a song, fixing a song, weighing in on a song. I remember Joey Moy saying how much pushback he got when he was working with FGL on Cruise, because he came from the rock world where you were constantly editing, reworking. This chorus is great, but it's a good pre-chorus, and that's all I'd been exposed to with my brother, right? And I just didn't know what I didn't know. And thankfully, I'll never forget Todd Clark. One of the pieces of feedback I'm sure you've heard and we've all heard on some level that we didn't want to hear is it sounds too Canadian. And I'll never forget sitting with John Marks and showing him Lawn Chair Lazy. And for anybody who doesn't know, John literally is they have a great team over there now. And at the time it was mostly him who was the ears that was vetting everything and still is. But and at the time I felt like John would just sit there and say, this is going to work or this is not going to work. And he seemed to always be right. And I remember sitting with John and just saying, here's this Lawn Chair Lazy song. It's really crushing it in Canada. What do you think? And I'll admit in my naivete, I was expecting him to be really impressed. And I was expecting him to go, wow, listen to that thing. That's a bop. That's immediate. Let's roll. How did I miss this? And his feedback was, I like it. It sounds very Canadian.
Mm.
And as soon as I heard it, I was like, oh, I know. I don't know exactly what you mean, but I know it's not what I want you to feel. And his feedback, I said, can you help me understand what you mean by that? And I remember him saying, and thank God he said it this way, I don't know if it's the production or something around the production, but I can tell you from the number of songs I listen to and the quality of what I'm hearing, this doesn't sound the same way these top things sound.
It just doesn't stack up in his opinion at the time.
And
he was at Spotify yet, or was that when he was still at Sirius?
He'd just come over to Spotify, and thank God for people that are honest, right? John knew I didn't want to hear that. It would have been way easier for him. We don't see each other that often. It would have been way easier for him to say, congrats, buddy. This is great. Go get them. Tell those guys they did a great job. And credit to him. And thank God he's so honest about it. He was just like, it can be better. If you're asking for my honest opinion, there's another level, which sent us back to the drawing board. And we did this, went back to Todd and talked with Todd about it, who's our producer, and changed the guy who was mixing everything. And the very next song we put out did head and shoulders better than anything we'd seen. And it was the very first song that Spotify put on Hot Country. And that was the song we pushed to the US, Chills. And there was one in between that was already out at the time. And just looking, it was called Just Saying, but just looking at it after you hear Lawn Chair Lazy, you hear Just Saying, and then you hear everything else, and it sounds like it's a whole different thing. And it was just a different mix. That's something
Chills was a whole other echelon for me. That was when I was like, wow, these guys got a chance in the US. And I know you rolled out a US radio campaign. You did quite well. You had some success. You got a lot of attention. But tell us a little bit for people who might not know, like, what is the difference between going to radio in the US and going to radio in Canada? I mean, obviously it's a much bigger network of stations you're dealing with. There's more money to sink into it, but politically it's entirely different too, correct?
It is. Yeah. It's funny. And I feel like this about Canada as a whole. I feel like this is the healthiest way we can look at the value we bring. It's a great market. If you look at the whole global country industry, it's not like pop music where Shawn Mendes writes a hit and it can go number one in 50 countries. Country music, you're talking 90-ish% any given year of global consumption is America. And then Canada is second by a long shot, but even in being second, we don't even represent 10% of global consumption. And there's not 30 other countries to play it. Thank God Europe's growing and Australia's building its own stability.
Coming along.
But it's your focus is you can have a career in Canada, and if you want to get into the US, you're talking about opening up 90+% of the global market. Well, naturally, the people that control that aren't too excited about anybody breaking the mold, because there's a reason that it's worked, and there's a reason that they have the setups they have, and the promo teams at the major labels and the major indies down there are fantastic for a reason. So the relationships just are what they are. There's only so many slots at radio, and what I love about the system and the setup, if you look at Canada, is on a process level, it's the same. On a process level, a radio tour is no different. You're going to go in and play your song. You're going to tell the story. In a perfect world, you're going to actually legitimately connect with that person on a human level and remember and build rapport, and you'll leave with a believer. That's the actual process, top to bottom, is no different than in America. And that's the same as the award shows. And that's the same as going on the morning breakfast shows and the morning television and going on any of our stuff.
It's just 10 times larger down there.
And they just have a lot more infrastructure because, unlike anything, if you make 10 times more money, there's going to be more infrastructure to support it. And so as long as we don't try to pretend or tell ourselves that success in America immediately equates to success in Canada, I personally believe we have a better artist development opportunity than you can find anywhere in the world if you're a country artist. To the point where I would say this, if I was on the CMA board, one of the things I'd be saying is, guys, you're missing a huge opportunity for artist development, because it's a 40 to 50 week radio cycle for your first single in America, and it's a 16 to 21 in Canada.
Right.
So if, like anything, if you can go somewhere and develop 2 or 3 times as quick, why wouldn't you? And I know you've done a great job of that with guys like Kip Moore, and I remember watching Dierks Bentley back when I was booking Boots, saying, there's a guy who understands how to build a market. Kenny Chesney comes up here and sells less tickets than Dierks Bentley. How's that possible? But it was a guy who focused on a market, and he could get a lot of reps in. And I believe personally, one of the great advantages we have as a Canadian country market is we have the opportunity to develop quicker than any of the Americans, because they're still on their first single, 40 to 50 weeks in, playing that same song, not having a chance to play more than usually a 20-minute set. And by the time we get there, we're on our third single, and we've played lots of festivals, and people know our music. And if we're building the fan base right, you've probably already done some sort of opening tour, and you're already on festivals, and you've already played all the morning shows. And you might even, if you're lucky, or thankfully at Universal, Tony Zamber opened up a bunch of amazing opportunities with the CFL, and you have people on their first single playing at a CFL stadium. That's no different than the process in America. You just don't get those opportunities till year 3 to 5.
Not out of the gate. No, that's for sure.
So,
Do you think that Canada will ever matter enough to the United States marketplace that they may consider executing different strategies up here for radio than they are in the U.S.? Universal client in the U.S. goes to Canada with 3 singles at the same time that they're putting out one stateside. Do you think that might happen?
I think so. I think you're starting to see people dabble with that idea and dabble with how to just squeeze more out of the rock. I think Tennille Towns' team has done an amazing job. Obviously, they have a unique understanding with Tennille being Canadian, but you see them running out a first single like somebody's daughter, and they know it's going to go 40 to 50 weeks in America. Well, after it goes number 1 and peaks here, they roll out Whitehorse. Well, that wasn't a single in America, right? But they got 2 singles out of that, and High Valley's done that as they signed down there. And I think you're going to start to see more of that with the Americans. Midland and Old Dominion, I think, were 2 acts that looked at Canada differently, that realized if they come up on their first single and their first album and have 3 touch points here, there's no reason they can't grow quicker than all the other people in Canada and start to develop more of a hard ticket draw. And I hope so. You'd understand some of that on a much deeper level than I would, but I believe America is starting to see Canada as more valuable than ever. At the same time, I think the success and the money they're drawing out of Canada and the strength of the market here, I think they're starting to apply to why they're so aggressive of trying to develop the UK and Europe and some of these other markets, because it's a very real market where they can make very real money. And we have a lot of country fans.
Right.
I think we might not have the infrastructure they have, but man, the people that have been in this industry in the last 10 years have laid some incredible groundwork in Canada, to the point where the foundation we're building on in a lot of ways is as strong as, I'd say it's stronger than any market I can imagine, for a niche market like we are, for country music to represent the size of the market that we do and the size of the global market we do versus some of those other places. I think that's something we should be really proud of. At the same time, I think it's one of those opportunities, if you see it for what it is, you can develop quicker and faster as long as you're putting the work in. It's just to what end? And I think that's where the business plan comes in.
Right. No, I agree with you. I certainly see much more prioritization from the agency front, from the managers in terms of touring up here. I mean, we've got a real advantage in terms of geographic proximity to the U.S. that they don't have in Australia or in Great Britain. Plus, we're the second largest country market in the world. And one of the reasons why we've developed a lot of the tertiary and secondary markets in Canada is to make sure that if we do get Midland up here, we can give them more than 6 shows. We can go across Canada and do a nice little 15-date tour. We've done that with Chase Rice, Kip Moore, obviously, as you mentioned. And so it's nice to see. I'm hoping that there'll be even more integration in terms of tailor-made plans at radio for artists like Kip Moore, who probably could be on 3 singles up here while he releases 1 down there, and grow his fan base even more and his equity even more in this marketplace. So it remains to be seen, but hopeful for it for sure.
Yeah, agreed. That's I think there's more blue sky. If there's one thing I feel like I'm learning, not pretending I fully get it, but as we stepped into this, I'd say one of the common threads from people I talk to, especially in Canada, because the market is only the size it is and the infrastructure is limited in the sense that we don't have the late night shows that can just break an artist.
We got no Kimmel up here.
Yeah, and a lot of the, I think you can take 2 approaches to that, which is either let's break through this, this mold, and when the tide rises, we all rise, or you look at the other side of it and you say, well, the pie's only so big. So Jim, if your new artist succeeds, that lessens my chance of success. And I'm hoping we can all continue to look at the first one, because I believe that's happened and is happening over this last 3 to 5 years, where I feel like it anyways, that people are getting less defensive of the ground they're on, as feeling like, the success of your new artist might mean that's going to take away from the success I have with one of my artists, as opposed to in America, you just see it approached very differently because there is a lot more ground to take. So they see it as more, you can be successful, I could be successful, and 50 other people can be successful, and there's no limit to it. It's been encouraging in the last 2 to 3 years, I think, just seeing people start to think a little differently on the Canadian front, saying, what are you doing differently? I love what you just did. Denny, I love what you just did there with Tyler Joe Miller getting a number 1 on your first song. What did you do differently? And what did we do differently with Jade to get 50 million streams on his first song? Or what do we do? Just trying to learn as much as we can in a way where the whole tide rises. I believe we have a unique opportunity there more than ever, with the strength of the industry and the strength of the different players in it, to just learn quicker and grow quicker, because we do have a more controllable test market that turns over quicker in 16 to 20 weeks. In America, it takes a long time to learn anything.
I think that's a great point. That scarcity mindset just mitigates our ability to collaborate as an industry, and we need to. It's imperative that we do, because you're right. We will have artists who are on different cycles, and they've got different opportunities at different times, and their star is going to rise and fall. And we can lean a little bit more on each other to put together package tours or collaborations on singles. And we can only do that if we all are secure enough in what we're doing to understand that we can contribute to the greater good. Let's talk a little bit about Jade, since I always like to plug my clients on this show, and he's just been an incredible success story. You guys are at 38 million views on YouTube and counting, I think, on the debut single on him. Now, how did that come together? Because that is such a stark achievement in the landscape in Canada. Nobody had ever done anything close to that before. How did you guys secure that campaign on YouTube for Jade in the beginning?
Yeah, again, this is another one where I wish I could take credit for some brilliant strategy. We have a really amazing director, Ben Nechtel, who we've done all of our stuff with, and Ben's a good friend who grew up with, and he did a lot of work with my brother, and then obviously most people know him as the guy who did the Call Me Maybe video and won MTV's Video of the Year for the whole world. And Ben's a great dude and a really creative dude, and he's from my hometown. So we've always worked with Ben on everything. It was his idea, and the funny part is, and I'll admit this. I argued with him. I thought he was wrong. It was one of the first videos we did with Jade, and I said, you can't do a first video for a brand new artist where the artist doesn't show up in the video until after 2 minutes in.
That's right. Crazy.
We can't do that. Well, that's the opposite of what we need to do. And
for people tuning in, or maybe who don't know, we're talking about Got Your Name on It. So so that's the video that Shannon's referring to, and I didn't mention that. I should have.
Yeah, and he brought this crazy idea. We loved the idea, and I kept saying, but we got to make the turn earlier. We can't wait for 2+ minutes to have them realize that's what Jade looks like. And he said, just trust me. And thank God we trusted him, because literally that video took off. It was the first Canadian signed artist ever of any genre to be chosen as YouTube's Artist on the Rise in the US. It didn't take off right away. The song was doing well. The video is doing well by Canadian standards. Looks like it was going to be on pace to get 1 or 2 million streams. But it didn't come out of the gate like gangbusters, where we were like, wow, look, see? We were just excited that it was doing what it was doing. And all of a sudden, it started to get lots of comments, and people started to share it, and people started to get excited about it. And over the course of a couple of weeks, we watched it climb and we watched it spike. And all of a sudden, we had YouTube US calling us saying, this is going bananas in the comments and the shares, and where is this? What's going on? And we just rode the wave, man. It's still doing almost 1 million streams a month, almost 1 million views a month. It's just flying. So that song hasn't slowed down, and it's really blown Jade up to the point where we weren't planning on releasing that album so soon, but he got an opportunity to tour with Gord that you put together right away, and go out with Bamford on that Dive Bars tour. And Jade, I'd say this if Jade was on here. He's one of my favorite humans. He's such an amazing kid, and we've had so much fun together and building this together. But man, that was not the plan. The plan was not to release one single and then throw an album out and then get him right out there. What I'd already told him is, don't worry, we're going to take our time. We're going to build this slowly. And that song just took off. And anybody who's ever seen Jade live or heard his voice live or met him in person will see why. He's as endearing as they come, and his voice just cuts through. It was actually fun to see it in a dive bar, because everybody's talking and he only had one song out. Nobody expected to pay attention to him. and his voice just cuts through a loud bar like that. And by the end of it, every night you'd see everybody totally quiet watching him. And so it's been a ton of fun watching Jade grow into. He's always had world class talent and he's always had world class ambition. Watching his confidence grow and him step into what he's capable of has been really, really cool this last couple of years.
Yeah, and the voice is unique and strong and powerful, but he's also got this presence about him. He's almost like a young version of the Marlboro Man, right? Like he's just got this perfect cowboy branding component to him that just it's undeniable and it's indelible. You know, when you meet him, and he just screams star. So you also were able to really tap into your desire to take some creative risk with him on this record too. You know, you got songs on there like Boomtown, Killer Track, Hack and Darts. I mean, these aren't songs that you generally hear on a debut safety first Canadian industry record, right?
Yeah, that was one of the things. Jade was one of my. Every artist you work with, you have a different initial story, a different origin story, right? And Jade is as unique as any story I've ever heard. And in meeting Jade and getting to connect with Jade, he had just some really interesting vision. He's a really wise guy. He's a very intelligent guy, but he tends to simplify every situation and remove all of the things that most people would think are going to be, well, that's too hard. We shouldn't do it. And he looks at it and goes, why not? And my favorite part about him is he knows he's very talented. He knows he has to work really hard like anybody else, and his work ethic has never been a question. Thankfully, he grows up on a farm, works his tail off. The funny part about Jade has been he looks at things and goes, that's fine, I'll do this, but I want to do Randy Travis. I didn't sign up in this business to sing the same song everybody else on the radio sings. And I'll never forget the first time I said, I know, I just need to hear you sing something modern. I just need to hear what it sounds like. And I connected him with the Great Reels guys, and thankfully Travis Wood and Gavin Slate trusted me and wrote with them that day. And I'll never forget two things. One, they called me an hour into it and said, was this a joke? And I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, we're only an hour in. We haven't even finished the chorus. And he got up and said, sorry, guys, I got to go home feed the pigs. Like, it was really nice to meet you. And he just left. And I forgot to tell Jade how long a write is, how this works and what this looks like. And he drove into Toronto to meet these guys and thought I don't know what he thought, but he had to go home and feed the pigs. He didn't get anybody to cover him on the farm. And the second part was he called me on the way home and said, I'm not singing that song. There's no instruments in that song. That whole thing is electronic. And it's been fun because right from the very minute we started working with Jade, he's had such a clear vision on who he is and who he wants to be. And thankfully, he back to our conversation of push and pull. He's pushed me, and he's let me push him, and we found this unique window where I don't think there's any song you could have Jade sing that wouldn't sound country because of his voice. And it took him a minute to feel that out and realize we could do the most poppiest production in the world, kind of like John Party, and it still sounds country. Thankfully, though, we've committed to, and he made us commit to it right off the bat. I want to do Randy Travis, Alan Jackson country. And
Right.
so that was part of it right from the get-go, is if we were going to do it, we needed to make sure some of that was on there. And that's still where he's happiest. You see him on stage, and as soon as he gets to play Hack and Darts or Whiskey Tonight or Boomtown, there's a whole different countenance that comes out of him, and it's fun watching that. It's old school country, but it's as credible as it comes.
It's interesting when you describe his ability to simplify things and break things down and chase what he wants to chase. I see why you work with him, because it's almost similar to how you described your entry into the business on the business side. You guys are very much aligned there. It's like, yeah, I just saw this opportunity. I broke it down into little steps, and you decided to go for it, and you had a vision, and so it's interesting to hear you describe it in him when you sort of described it in yourself about 45 minutes earlier in this conversation. So I totally get why you guys work together, and I'm really excited about the future with him. Tell us a little bit about the Songland opportunity for Griffin Palmer and how that all came together, because there's a guy who's also an incredible songwriter. Obviously, that's borne itself out now in the public eye, and you've got some great plans for him for the future.
Yeah, Griff's an absolute rock star, and you're hoping in anything you build or anything you're doing that your push can become a pull at some point. You're pushing a rock up a hill, and you're just trying to learn and prove you can do something, and you hope you have enough success or goodwill or relationships, and at some point it becomes a pull, and it starts to come back to you. And Griff was the best example of that I can imagine. It was one of the most rewarding experiences I've had since becoming a manager. Is a guy named Jeff Warburton, who wrote a lot of the early Shawn Mendes stuff and a bunch of big global hits. I'd met him through the SoCan Awards and through the Rec Laws video. Randomly, he was friends with those guys, and I didn't realize who it was, and connected with him, and realized he had a history in the Christian music space and loved my brother's band, and we connected. Long story short, fast forward, he meets this kid Griffin Palmer, and says, "Man, he calls me one day and says, 'You got to meet this kid. I haven't felt this way about anybody since I met Sean. Like, this kid is so special. He's incredible. He's going to be a global star.'" Well, anytime someone says that, period, it's hard not to have your ears go up and make sure you check it out. But in this case, for Jeff Warburton to say that added a lot of credibility. And I remember saying to the other guys at the office, "I know we're representing a lot of folks right now. Let's have them come in, and if the hair on our arms stand up, we'll do it. And if not, we'll give them advice and connect them with some other people." And the rest of the story's history. He came in and literally wasn't even into the first chorus. I saw his YouTube videos and the stuff he was doing, and I already felt it and was like, "Man, we got to do this." Those guys saw it, and if Don Green by the first chorus can feel something enough to be sold when the bandwidth is already low, then you know you're onto something special. And right away, Don was like looking at me going, "Oh." So man, it's been a blast. That was only a year and a bit ago. He signed right to Big Loud US right away. Long story short in that, Seth and talked to Brianne, and Brianne set it all up. She said, "Send them down. Let's take a look at it. I love what I'm seeing." They happen to be in town that week. Sometimes it's just God working, right? I called them, didn't know they were in town with Hardy. So after the call, Brianne set it up. Like 3 days later, Clay and her are in our office listening to Griff play. Said, "Send him down." He went down and wrote with them for a week, and Seth was like, "I want this kid." Signed him to the label, signed him to publishing. And so he's been writing for a year. So Songland came out of that. Seth called me one day saying, "Have you heard of this? I'd love to say ahead with my A&R hat on. I should have known about it. I'd seen it, but I didn't realize the opportunity." And so we right away submitted him for it. And the rest is history. He was on with Sean Austin on the episode, and obviously seeing Madeline on there, it was great to see some Canadian representation on Songline. But he went on and crushed it. And anybody who's seen that episode got a good glimpse of what's coming. He, even the Florida Georgia Line guys were like, "You got to be an artist. You got to friggin' go do this." And he's such a natural. It's pretty fun to watch. So it's going to be fun, but really in any of the family, and you believe in each one of these people individually, but you really want them to see the common thread and not feel threatened by each other. And that you need a special artist somewhere in the mix to create that atmosphere. And thankfully with Rec Laws and JBB right off the bat, they should have been competitive for so many reasons. And thankfully right away, James and the guys took the lead and just were like, "We love these guys. They're so much fun to be around," and really looked out for them. And the Rec Laws have passed that on to everybody we've worked with. And so we're really thankful that our guys we haven't had a lot of conflict there. And then with Griffin coming on, thankfully they've all met him and love him. And some of them co-written with him already. And as you know, it's not as easy as you draw it up sometimes to try to build a family, especially when they're all in a competitive business. But thankfully it's been a blast so far.
Yeah, you've done a great job at creating great culture among your artists where they support each other, they share each other's material on socials, and that's not always easy. It's a very competitive business, and people get hyper competitive in the eye of the storm for sure. But speaking about great songwriters, I want to make sure that we touch on Emily Reed, who's another great project. I remember bearing witness to her talent and ability in 2014, the CCMA Discovery Program. She was just heads and shoulders above so many other people in that domain, and just had a way about her, and her brand is so endearing, and she's so ingratiating, and on stage she's able to translate so well. But it really starts with the song with her as well, and she gets it. She gets what she is, and has just a profound vision for where she wants to be.
Yeah, and she's just a ray of sunshine. Like sometimes every artist brings a unique value into a room. It takes you a minute to figure out what it is. It takes you about 30 seconds to see Emily's charisma and personality. Every room she walks into, people just want to be around her. Artists want to be around her. Writers want to be around her. Industry folks just want to be around her. Our other artists want to be around her. They weren't offended or threatened. They were just like, "I love her. I want to do more with her." And when you can work with a personality like that, you can't buy those and you can't find those. You just got to hope it's in there. And Em's one of those ones you think you're getting good at something, you need to train people or you need to help people. And I'll say for Em, I've never chased an artist like we chased her, probably for 6 to 8 months, calling her once a week. Her writing was already incredible. But she's one of those ones you just pull the string and send her in the room and everybody leaves being like, oh my gosh, I love her. When is her new stuff coming out? And so she's been as much fun to work with as anybody I've met. And she's such an artist. She cares about the color being right and the song being perfect. And she wants to dig into the production side a lot more than a lot of people. And so it's been a lot of fun working with her. And she just moved to LA. She just moved in with her fiance, who's a big time producer. And who knows what LA is going to rub off on her. So she's in the middle of an exciting new season. And that was the first female I've worked with. Anybody who tells me, I've heard from everybody, that female lane's hard. It's a whole different world. And I grew up with 3 brothers. I'll be the first to admit my wife is probably surprised on a weekly basis about how little I understand sometimes about women. And Emily has just been so delightful to work with. And I can be honest about saying there was a lot of stuff I needed to learn in the industry side for sure, of the different challenge of trying to break a female and the different challenge of the kind of songs that people will play and the opportunity in front of them. And that's a whole nother world. So we've learned a lot.
So what's an example of that? Like, what do you see in terms of unique challenges to females in our business based on your experience with Emily?
Well, I'll say that I would love to say this from a perspective of knowing. I obviously haven't figured it out. What I'd say is the song we led with Emily, if we led with that with any of our other artists, we would have had a smash.
Right.
And I can say that definitively. I would say that on any panel in front of anyone. That is an absolute smash song. Good Time Being a Woman. It couldn't have been more empowering. It couldn't have fit more with everything that was going on at the time.
It felt like the glory days of Shania to me.
And she absolutely crushed it. And the only deduction I can make is that I guess radio wasn't ready for a female on her first song to release a song that empowered or that powerful. Maybe we should have started with a ballad that was a little more digestible. I'm not sure, but I'm sure that if Carrie Underwood releases that song, it's a smash. I'm sure that you go, that's the top of the food chain, obviously vocally. You take that down to whatever the bottom of the food chain is that's successful vocally in America, and you give them that song as a female, it's a smash. The song itself, she wrote it. It was a killer. From the first minute I heard it, I was like, wow, we got one. And she crushed it. She played it at the CFL at the stadium. They loved it. It got a bunch of syncs. It was synced for the female world championships of hockey. The song did great. It synced in shows on CMT in Nashville. And for whatever reason, it didn't go. And it not only didn't go, it went so much less than every other song we've ever released as a #1 song that I don't have another way to cut it. We didn't do anything differently. We didn't push her any less. The label was fully behind her. And the feedback we got was varied across the board from the PDs that they weren't sold on it. And that was a hard thing to get my head around, but it also is, I know there's a lot of steps being taken there with Amanda Kingsland and then the group of powerful women she's brought around her, and with Tracy Martin and things that are happening at the CCMAs. And I know there's ground being broken there, and I got to own that. I thought that was the right first song. I remember showing you and being so proud of it, being like, man, this is going to crush. This is a massive song.
And I agreed. And listen, when I saw it live is when I was really convinced, when she opened for James Barker Band in Toronto. And I was like, yeah, this is a smash, you know? And I saw the way the audience responded to it. And it just seemed like it was going to translate. But, for one reason or another, it didn't. Maybe we've got some work to do on that front. Maybe it's just not the right song at the right time. Maybe it has something to do with the culture of how women empowerment songs are received in country music, although other artists have had success in that domain. So we have to be cognizant of that as we evaluate it. But, I'm in for the long haul on her, and I know you are too. And, eventually we'll get the formula right.
Yeah, the talent's there. Now it's on me. I got to figure it out and bring something to you that's making sense. So it's been a blast. But yeah, I've got a good dose of any managers before me who've tried to figure out that female lane in these last 5 years. I'd heard them talk about it, and I had no appreciation fully for how difficult it was, and I'm learning that appreciation now.
Shannon, it has been a delight talking to you, brother. Thanks for coming on and doing this. I'm thrilled to have you share your expertise so transparently, and I think this is going to be a good fly on the wall conversation for young artists, other industry people in the business in Canada, and Thanks for sharing your wisdom.
Appreciate it, Jim. Thanks, man.